I think we're good to go. I mean, we've had a strong cohort come in already, and good evening to everybody. I think this is our 5th episode of webinar series 2, and we've got 2 incredible hockey people, coaches, former players with us this evening to share some of their stories. We've got our Easter head coach of hockey that hasn't delivered an Easter hockey session yet. Fingers crossed moving forward. Gary Johnson, who is at England Hockey, and I'll let Gary talk about his sort of involvement in the game in a minute. I'm really delighted to welcome Beckie into the team, and we can't wait to have you back have you over to Sedbergh in summer to lead the hockey program there. What I would say is, Gary, we've talked before about this actually, and I'm in real good company around hockey people. So we'll discuss and open it up a little bit around the hockey community as a whole at the moment around coaching, coach education and stuff like that. Well, in Rusty's words and John Fletcher's words, are leading the way. So it would definitely be the ECB and England Hockey. So why do we think England Hockey are so good at developing curious coaches and coach educators?
Oh, wow, you've opened
big
that
question.
up
We'll start big. And I'm sure, Beckie, do you see what I did there? I'm going to ease you into this really slowly. So I'll start with Gary.
I'll definitely leave that on to Gary.
Oh, thanks, mate. Welcome back, Gary, to this discussion. Yeah, thanks. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're well. I don't think it's England Hockey that sort of created that. I think hockey as a whole has always had curious coaches and people that sort of really get stuck into things, and there's always going to be some that don't, and I think that's the same in any sport. But it probably seems bigger because we're a smaller community and we've got a lot more engagement with the way that things go. You're right in that we did shift. So we did shift from one philosophy to another around this principles led, down this questioning route. But then similar to teaching, you go down one way and, think about the flipped classroom and the way that was sort of brought in and things like that, that there's always going to be people that don't sort of fill in line with that, but that doesn't make them a bad coach. It just, it just means that they're not quite doing what the NGB says. And ultimately, we're trying to change a whole culture. And we're certainly not saying what happened before was bad, but where we're at now is that we've got this culture and we do need to sort of make a little shift back in certain ways we wanted to make hockey fun, definitely wanted to make hockey fun. And the golden thread was really there as a dial. When do you need to turn things up? When do you need to turn things down? If you're doing it, why are you doing it? And I think now that that's got out there, it's around us educating around that. I would call it a graphic equalizer, but most people who are my age or younger probably don't have a real clue what a graphic equalizer is. So, yeah. It goes, something goes up and then another part of it goes down. So when I used to turn my bass up on my music as a child, some other part of the stereo system would go down. So, just the way that it works. And again, it's the same with coaching, if you're turning up fun and things like that, there are other things that are going to have to be dialed down. When you turn up the amount of touches that you have, it's probably not going to look as much like the game. When you turn it up about looking more like the game, whether that's 11 aside, 6 aside, 7 aside, whatever it is, other bits of the things will dial back down. So we just now need to continue that education to make people aware of like why you would do things. And hopefully they can then continue to explore that rather than, some people perceive our philosophy around it's just games and you just throw a ball in and let them play. Well, that's, you can do that, but you need to coach along the way as well. So there are things that definitely
There's a huge advantage then of having a small community and such. It's sort of, you can connect more, discuss more, bring people's opinions in, and share some stuff in a really joined up collaborative way. Beckie, have you got any thoughts around why England hockey coaches would be described in such a manner?
I think that kind of the nature of the sport lends itself to just kind of innovation. So I'd kind of agree. I think the governing bodies kind of had various different things that it's kind of pushed or believed in, across time, and naturally that's kind of changed and shifted. But, if you actually look at hockey as a sport, over the last kind of 25, 30 years the game looks completely different to what it did in the year 2000, for example. So we've got different rules which have completely changed it. Self-pass, no offsides, the equipment we use, the kind of technology that we've embraced. So you look at kind of VAR and football and how much sort of, it brings to the game, but also the kind of controversy and trouble it seems to cause. Whereas I think hockey is a very kind of forward-looking sport in that respect. And it, I think that probably translates to coaching and playing as well. And, ultimately, if we've got a bunch of coaches across the country, whether that's in, the pathway or whether that's in clubs and schools, then, that aspect of the game will ultimately end up out on the pitch as well.
Yeah, innovation, evolution, creativity. I think those are the things that, from my background within the rugby circles, is something that we're actually getting hold of at the minute and really exploring. And I like the way you put that, Gary, as well, around it's not just a game with a ball in the middle of it. There's so much more around that. And I was talking this week to a group of coaches around having that dynamic environment of learning. And as long as you've got your learning and your blueprint understood by you and your co-coaches, then you're going to get some success at the end of it. Well, that's a really good start. And what I want to do at the moment is just welcome everybody again and just give some structure to the evening. So we're gonna start with what we're up to currently with Gary and Beckie. But I would say in the previous episode so far, the chat box has gone brilliantly well. So please do feel free to drop any questions in there, and I'll try and manage to the best of my ability. And we'll just try and go back and forth to that throughout the evening. What we will do at the end of this as well in the next couple of days is everybody that's joined tonight will send you an email with the link to the full recording. So if you do miss anything or want to recap on anything, then you'll have the opportunity to do so. So Beckie, do you want to start us off first? Do you want to give us, before we go into a wider discussion around your sort of playing career and coaching career, do you want to give us an up-to-date of where you're up to in the world of hockey? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, like everybody else, the last couple of months I haven't been doing much hockey at all. But hopefully, in a few weeks' time at least, I'll be back to the sort of the usual day job, as it were. So at the moment, I'm not actually really playing much beyond just doing it for a bit of fun and training, playing an occasional game here and there. And that's mostly just because I'm sort of more and more involved in coaching. And it's not always that easy to sort of tie those two things together. So in terms of what I actually am doing coaching wise, I'm first team coach at Guildford men's first 11. So we're playing in the South Prem, aiming to get promoted into National League this year. And that's been sort of something I've only started this season. It's quite an interesting time to do it, obviously with all the various kind of stuff with COVID going on, but really, really enjoyed the first half of the season. As well as that, do lots of things like sort of camps, do masterclasses in schools, that kind of thing. So I'm basically really used to sort of coaching people from kind of age, 3 or 4 years old right up to senior level. And then aside from coaching, I also am really interested in coach education. So run a coaching company, and a lot of the work we do is around kind of leading workshops, writing resources, supporting coaches just around kind of learning about the art of coaching. And then finally, I've been a player at Sedbergh Hockey Club for a number of years, and I work in a couple of capacities for the club. So I kind of media manager, so I do the kind of club website, club magazine, that sort of stuff. And then I also help manage the SHC Community Project, which is the club's outreach programme. And that's all about bringing hockey into schools, and particularly state schools, for kids who don't necessarily have sort of easy access to our sport or sport in general, either in their school life or outside of school. So that's a really kind of rewarding thing to be part of. So quite a kind of wide range of things, really.
Yeah, I think you've ticked everything. Sorry, I'm just going over and ticking everything. Beckie, just picking up on that first bit, did you say you coached the Guildford men's team?
Yeah.
I coached the women's team once, and once was enough. Like, it was a completely different picture to me. They're much more intelligent. They challenged an awful lot more. Very methodical. I'd say they had better connections as a team because they speak to each other and people tend to listen. And I found it a really bizarre. Like, I was out of my comfort zone because I thought it would just go hand in hand, side by side. This is just coaching. But it was a completely new dynamic to me, and one that I'll definitely go back to. But how do you find coaching the men's team from a women's perspective?
It's funny because a lot of people kind of asked me about this, or almost made a bit of a thing about the fact it's kind of a slightly, not completely, but a slightly unusual kind of thing to have a female coaching a men's team. I think overall there are aspects of it which maybe are a little bit different to working with the women's side, but ultimately every team you coach is different. Every team has different characters, different things that kind of make them tick, get the best out of them. They need pushing on. They're already naturally kind of really good at as a group. So I think, I get out there and I try and sort of learn every time I'm out on the pitch, whether it's a training session or a game day or whatever. There probably are bits of it that have pushed me a bit on, maybe aspects of my coaching or my kind of character that don't come quite as naturally. But overall, I don't tend to think about it a great deal, to be honest.
Yeah, no, well, I tell a lie. I've done it a few times coaching women's teams, and I do it at my local rugby club as well. But you have to have that mindset that you're learning, definitely. So I'm picking up on cues all the time, interactions, and I find it really challenging in mine. But it was just intrigued to find the other way around. So from a woman's perspective to coaching men, I thought you'd say it's really easy. They just do as I say and crack on. Just talking a little bit around your outreach program, because I never played hockey. I went to state school before I went to Sedbergh as a boy. And we never had a hockey experience. So what would a hockey experience in a state school look like? Because obviously we want to get them the bug to pitch up at the local hockey club, I imagine. Yeah,
so that's ultimately the aim, is to try and give kids who, say, don't have maybe the facilities or the kind of maybe the financial ability to play the game, a bit of an access route into it. So typically we'll send in a coach, usually a young coach, but an experienced and kind of quite inspirational young coach into a school. They'll run a series of sessions. Often it's kind of an introduction to the game. For kids who've maybe done a term or a year of hockey, it would obviously sort of maybe push them on a little bit further. Often it will be on a playground, or not something you typically associate as a surface you might play hockey on.
Yeah.
But it's brilliant to see the kind of impact it has. And I know there's a few things out there, programs which are trying to kind of raise the profile of the sport and make it more accessible. And actually the Surbiton one is a brilliant example, and probably is the biggest one out there, but it's not that widely known about. And I think that's almost one of the sort of challenges in a way, is breaking the kind of perception that Surbiton's a kind of real sort of Surrey club, and is sort of associated purely with private schools, and that's actually not the case. And we've got loads and loads of kids now who come through into the junior section at Surbiton having first experienced hockey on a playground at school, or with borrowed equipment, where they've just been inspired by coaches come in and taught them the kind of fundamentals of the game. So it's a really cool thing to be part of.
Yeah, I think that goes back to our point and discussion point before around being creative and innovative. Like we're moving the sort of the pitch, and creating different forms of the game and entry levels, and getting out to meet people as opposed to expecting people to turn up. So I think that's a really forward-thinking way from hockey clubs in general. So Gary, your point about not just England hockey, but hockey in general, are doing everything they can to engage and increase participation, which is brilliant. Gary, what's your involvement at the minute? You've got lots of different hats. We could be a while, but try and be as snappy as you can.
I'll be snappy as I can. So day job, work for England Hockey as relationship manager, which is a pretty cool title in itself. So when you think about it, so yeah, dealing with clubs, other organisations, stakeholders, etc. around hockey in general. So at the moment, that's pretty busy with trying to get things sorted out, back up and running, hopefully. Also work for the organisation as a coach developer. So that's really cool. I really enjoy that bit, getting stuck into some of the delivery and really supporting coaches on their journey, whether that's coaches that have been delivering for ages or whether that's new coaches, etc. So that I really enjoy that element. Third part of my role is player pathway head coach. So when it comes to stuff there, again, looking after the performance centre in Yorkshire, looking after the boys there, really enjoy that. And it's something which over time has really grown, and we've got a fantastic group of coaches and kids as well involved now, and the work that's gone on to really make that accessible for everyone has been fantastic. So that's kind of like national governing body work. Outside of that, very fortunate to have joined the Loughborough team this year on the ladies' side. So swapped genders for the first time. So that's new for me. That's me challenging myself in my own coach ed, in the fact of I've always coached boys or male teams. Here we go. Really new Brett. I've known Brett for a long time. New Andy Gibson to join them, supporting the ladies ones and the twos as best I can. And that's been eye-opening, as much as the season's never really got going. Really eye-opening for me in just the way that you really do need to think about different ways, and the way that you coach and the things that you say and how you say them. So it really mindful of that. Not that I wasn't before, but again, just again, it's just understanding where people are, and again, the girls or the ladies that are there, different journeys that they're on, the pressures that they may be under through education, through EDP or GB programs that they're on, or actually they're not part of that now and they were before and they're trying to get back into it. So yeah, and then the final one, which is similar to Beckie in respect, is heading up local charity, which gets into state schools, gets into the local community groups to try and we created like a triangle. So the club doesn't, or the local clubs don't have people that can go out into schools and into these community groups. So we created the partnership, and the team at Hurricane have been fantastic with that, in creating those partnerships, getting out, and then having this triangle: local club, charity, and then the organisation, whether that's a school or a community group such as Scouts, Beavers, the Women's Institute, which is another fantastic group to get stuck into, and get out there, get the over 50s doing some hockey on a weekly basis, or it might be that delivery in school, which is great. So yeah, it's pretty busy in hockey world, mate. Yeah,
we should have caught up as a triangle much earlier. You're inspiring me to get back out and doing a bit more, but I imagine it's 7 days a week, and at this moment in time, with two little ankle biters in my house, I'm not too sure I get that time to get out, but it's certainly action packed. Gary just talked about your player pathway head coach role, so we're going to have lots of people listening into this that are aspiring hockey players. So what are the things, if you could, pick 2 or 3 things that you would ask them to bring to the party to be noticed or to focus on? I know it's on the spot, but roughly what would they look like?
I think it's really important that we've had the end in mind principles for a long time, and I always refer to parents and players around this. Is actually being skilled and being creative is one element of those end in minds. And you often talk to people about, oh, he's great or she's great and she does this, and it's like, okay, well, does that nicely with the ball, which is fantastic, but what are you doing then off the ball? How skilled and creative are you off the ball, technically, tactically, etc. So for me, I always think that it's more than just what they're doing with the ball. A lot of people just watch the ball stuff, and then you get told that this is why these players are really good. So highly skilled and creative is one, but again, that's on and in and out of possession again, and what can they do technically and tactically. So again, creativity with tactics is really key within that. But then about that robustness, I've seen players over time are just not quite robust enough to be able to cope with the high level of training, and that's even at club. That's not necessarily pathway, but again, that robustness of time and time again, being able to repeat the things that we do at quite a high intense pace, or large pitch but smaller numbers, so actually build that up. The decisions that the people make, so again, those effective decisions that they're making, again, on the ball, out of possession, again, are really key. Can they self-organise? And it's great that you can do it on your own, but if me and Beckie are on the same team with you, Jace, yeah, I make that decision, so I've made an effective decision and I'm going to self-organise. But if you don't know what I'm doing, then that's that's not really great. So you've got to self-organize as an individual, but within a team structure. Again, is really important. And the last bit for me is what it takes to win attitude. Yeah, it's different to winning at all costs. The attitude that a player has is really important as well. So those are the 5 key principles, and I agree that the NGB's principles, but for me, they are real key for developing as a hockey player, and potentially why we have them.
Brilliant, good man. And then lastly, before I shift back over to Becky, is so we got close to running our Easter courses last year. We're very touch and go with running them this year, but we have got Plan B and Plan C lined up. Do you want to talk around sort of what you'll bring, or what we discussed about bringing to the Easter hockey course?
Yeah, can't wait. I really can't wait. I just hope we can. Plan A, obviously, deliver at Sedbergh. Get some stuff, get out on the pitch, get to know, get stuck in. Yeah. Plan B, we might go out on the road if we can. We can't. We'll see how we get on. So yeah, definitely looking forward to getting out there. For me, the plan hasn't changed. We discussed it in the last lockdown, and we came on and had a bit. I'd really like to be able to run some cool mornings or afternoons and have a theme to those. So again, if we think about what I mentioned previously about being brave, so maybe one of the days about being brave, and that's not just about the stuff we do on the pitch. So the stuff that we might do off the pitch as well is about developing that being brave, and we need to fit that into your gold stuff. So again, if we think about the growth, the originality, the leadership, and the determination, for me, that would be the point that we're then trying to fit in the determination. So again, I want to look at that. And then from an end in mind principles, I really want to then challenge the what it takes to win attitude around being brave. And what does being brave mean? Whether that's a goalkeeper, whether that's a defender, whether that's a forward, whether that's a midfielder, whether you're playing between the lines, whatever that might be, that would be a theme that we'd bring, and we'd start to look at it technically and tactically around that. And then can we help them physically and mentally as well? Because that's a lot of the time what coaches would neglect. And we've got the 4 areas of the player, not just the 2.
Class. And Becky, we've got more time to make sure that the summer one's much better than the Easter one. So we'll pinch all of Gary's good ideas, and then we'll just add them to ours for the summer and just put the cherry on top. Cheers, Gary, and we'll come back to you in a minute. Becky, I just want to sort of now touch around your playing career. You can give us a bit of an insight into where it all started in a minute, but I just want to highlight sort of 104 England and GB caps. I had to write all these accolades down, and we'll get going. So you had a Commonwealth and 3 European medals, 11 English national titles, outdoor, and 3 indoor. Premier League Player of the Year, 2014, 2015. You've achieved pretty much, as much as you can do. That's incredible. But where did it all start for you? Do you want to take us right back to the start of that journey and talk us through it?
Yeah, so I actually, I grew up in Jersey. So small island, for anyone who's not been there, go, it's beautiful when we're allowed to travel again. Little plug there for the Jersey Tourism Board. But I mean, it's a really small island. It's 9 miles wide, 5 miles long. So it's, a pretty kind of little outpost really. I literally, as with, I'm sure, lots of the kids who will be coming to the various camps this year, I was pretty much a sports nut. I did everything kind of, gymnastics, athletics, football, tennis, basically, name a sport and I'd be out there playing it. And I think there are different challenges, and any kid who grows up somewhere that's outside of the sort of, a big, in this case, hockey town, or away from a big hockey club, there are a few different challenges. So, I think there was a kind of a level of independence that I probably had to learn pretty young. I had to be like super organized because, rather than just sort of turning up to a camp or a training day or whatever, usually I had to sort of travel over straight from school on a Friday night, and then maybe wouldn't get back again until first thing Monday morning. And, so I had to kind of figure out that side of things with my studies. And I think probably more importantly than anything, it was just that real sense of wanting to kind of make the most of any opportunity I had. I think a lot of, this isn't the case everywhere by any stretch, but a lot of kids now are lucky enough to get great coaching, 2, 3, 4 times a week, play really competitive games, most weekends and probably midweek as well. And that was probably the one big thing that I didn't necessarily have growing up. So definitely really had that sense of wanting to just grab every chance that I could, both to, try and get somewhere and, hopefully be selected for things, but also to actually just learn and develop as a player. And I think, from there, I went to uni in Loughborough. So went off aged kind of 18. And, I was very fortunate to play senior international hockey at a pretty young age. So by the time I kind of went off to uni, I was already sort of involved in the senior setup. And I think the fortune in that, I guess, came from the fact that I, was surrounded by already established senior athletes. So the minute I kind of went off to uni, I was in a training group with Olympians, with people who kind of been there and done it. And, you very quickly, the bits maybe that you do need to learn fast on, you do learn fast on. And I think that sort of training group in Loughborough, when I kind of look back in general, I think that was probably maybe the difference in some ways for me in terms of just the sort of environment I was in, how quickly I learned what it meant to be a full-time athlete, sort of aspiring to achieve everything I could in the game.
That's pretty cool. We were talking last week, we had a lad called Bevan Rod on, and he was from the Isle of Man, and he said about his rugby, and he's just started playing in the first team for Sale Sharks at the moment and on England's radar. And he said that the real lack of competition and fixtures was something that he had to live with and get used to. And then eventually he moved over to the UK. But it's interesting getting your point on independence. And he also used the word hunger. So it was like, I actually really enjoy this game. I want to be a part of it. And the other sort of skills that we would call them, he developed much quicker. So, okay, he didn't have the full team, and it was an adapted game of rugby. It wasn't sort of the same, different age groups and so on. But he said what it taught him was completely invaluable. Like, it was just that was sort of giving the best grounding and sort of springboard he could have wished for. Am I sort of along the same lines?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it's actually one of my sort of bugbears as a coach, and having worked previously in a school as well, where I think there's been a bit of a shift, which I think partly is down to safeguarding and the kind of regulations and that sort of thing that are around now. But I think trying to develop really responsible, and I know Gary's already used the word self-organizing, and I think that primarily is around stuff on the pitch, but actually self-organizing off the pitch is such a crucial skill. And I think like ultimately you can learn these skills at any age, but if you embed them when you're a kid, a teenager, and as a parent, as a coach, as a staff member, you kind of try and create an environment where those sort of skills are able to thrive, I think it's absolutely crucial. And as you sort of progress and if you're lucky enough to play at the higher end of the game, there's obviously certain kind of pressures that come with that, whether it's managing academics when you're at uni, whether it's performing in a sort of high pressure environment, whether it's traveling, whether it's being tired and having to kind of cope with things emotionally. The more that you're able to sort of develop the skills that you need off the pitch to thrive, the easier it is to perform well on the pitch. So yeah, I wholeheartedly kind of say that it might sound a bit kind of boring and a bit weird, but I genuinely think being a kind of responsible, organised person off the pitch actually has a massive impact on your ability to kind of reach your potential.
I fell out with my dad very early on because he'd sit me by the door after every training session or game on a Sunday, and he'd be like, right, it's time to clean and polish your boots, get them ready for training. Oh man, we fell out big time, but I get it on the other side. What intrigues me a little bit about your story, Beckie, was you made your international debut very early, didn't you? Very young.
Yeah. So I was 17. I was in my last year at school. Yeah.
So how did you feel making your debut so young, and what was sort of like the how did you cope? So how, was the site, was Beckie confident? Was Beckie nervous? Was she anxious? Did she have lots of self-belief as well? What was the coping strategy, or is coping strategy the right word? What was the strategy in general?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite conscious that it was, it was a while ago now, and so I'm kind of conscious that it maybe in my mind I've sort of changed it or I remember it differently, but I genuinely don't think I kind of overthought it. I felt very grateful to be given an opportunity, and ultimately when I was 17, I probably wasn't really ready to be playing international hockey. There were certainly lots of people who were, would have been ahead of me in the sort of pecking order, but I was kind of given an opportunity, which obviously, as I say, I was very appreciative of. But I mean, I only had a few days' notice. I remember having a conversation with my biology teacher, my A-level biology teacher, about kind of why I needed to take a couple of days off school to go off and play this sort of, international hockey match, and he sort of didn't really get it. But I think that was kind of that's the stuff I remember. I remember we got stuck on the M2 in like gridlock traffic between game 1 and game 2, traveling to a different venue. And I remember that stuff more than I actually remember feeling nervous or putting pressure on myself. And I think I just really wanted to make sure that I enjoyed it and sort of appreciate the opportunity. And I was obviously hoping that it would be the first of a few more caps, but you obviously never know. And I think I would have really kicked myself if I'd only played those couple of games and I'd never been lucky enough to pull on the shirt again. I'd have really kicked myself if I hadn't enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's a great mindset to have. And I don't know whether it's hockey specific or it's individual to the person, but to have that outlook and mindset that this is going to be fun, I'm going to get stuck in and work hard and everything will be all right. It's really refreshing to hear, especially in the day and age. Well, in the day and age now, I think it's a great message for youngsters today, because I think we can get so wrapped up with social media, so wrapped up in media hype, live streams, everything else, that actually the fundamentals of why you play the sport, you're going to get stuck in, you're going to enjoy it, and you're going to do what you do every other week, and it's just in a different environment.
I think I also think it's like really sort of crucial to understand that like not everything will always feel fun. And you can't just kind of put a happy face on the whole time. And I certainly had plenty of experiences in my career. I never got selected for the Olympics. I went through 2.5 Olympic cycles, never kind of achieved my dream in that sense. And there's so many aspects of that, just extremely difficult kind of emotion you need to deal with mentally and all that kind of thing. But when it kind of came back to it, I could always fall back on that sort of sense of, if somebody said to me tomorrow morning, you can never play hockey again, what would I actually be most sad about? Would it be that I couldn't go to the Olympics, or would it be that I couldn't run around the pitch with my mates? And it's a really easy question for me to answer, because I know it's the latter. And I think, if you get too caught up on, there's nothing wrong, of course, with having targets and having aspirations and working hard to try and achieve things. But, if you're motivated by actually the process and the day-to-day stuff, then it stands you in kind of better stead, I think, for coping with the ups and downs of sport.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. I didn't know that about you, and it must be really tough, because I was rattling off before all these incredible accolades, and it's like, wow, this is superwoman of the hockey world. But even in your position, in which you had some incredible experiences in, there was still some sort of lows. I imagine there might have been, I don't know, but there might have been an injury or two along the way. There might have been non-selection in different things. So when we see people achieving so much, and we probably don't see the full picture, was there any particular way or any manner in which you sort of dealt with that to get you through it? Was there a coping mechanism there?
Well, that's probably a pretty tough one to answer. I think, like I said, I think you have to, or you'd be very sort of silly not to accept and to expect there to be sort of ups and downs. And ultimately, the higher you get into a sport, I suppose, there's perhaps an argument that the highs get higher and the lows get lower.
Yeah.
But I think, being able to kind of deal with those things and just say kind of accepting that they're there and they might happen to you is pretty important. It's like resilience is obviously a real kind of buzzword in coaching and in kind of player development and that kind of thing. And ultimately, I really strongly believe that you you can't develop resilience without kind of facing setbacks. And it might be something really small. It might just be a frustration that you know, are struggling to learn a skill, or it might be just a minor injury that keeps you out of, you know, 1 or 2 games. But, you know, kind of, yeah, facing up to those things as you go along, and expecting, you know, there to be a few little blips along the way and maybe some big ones, I guess does help you to sort of deal with those situations when they arise.
Beckie, we'll jump over to Gary in a second, but Phil has just had a really good question in the chat box. So do you have a favourite memorable moment as a player?
So in terms of a kind of specific moment, it was probably winning bronze in the Commonwealths in Melbourne. It was one of those kind of things. It was the only multi-sport event I went to in the end. I was 19, you know, I was in Australia, the sun was shining. We won a bronze medal on penalties. It was like old school strokes, not shootouts like it is now. And I think from a kind of purely sort of, yeah, a bit of drama and something that really sticks in my mind, that would probably be it. In more general terms, I think just the sort of various travelling that hockey's, you know, given me the opportunity to do, whether that's travelling overseas with the kind of England GB squads or playing club and kind of rep hockey in various different places. You know, I've been lucky enough to kind of make friends from kind of here, there and everywhere. And yeah, I think there's so many kind of experiences like that, which I just don't think I'd have had the opportunity to have without hockey. So basically I just love traveling. So obviously the last year brought that into
Hockey was the vehicle.
Start reality, yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Gary, chuck it over to you. Tell us a little bit what made you fall in love with the sport, because your early days were not hockey.
No, well, they were. So my dad and my granddad were massive hockey players. My dad played for England schoolboys and things like that. So I was brought up at a hockey pitch. It's just first ever memories. But my dad retired when I was quite young. But he kept himself fit. So he kept himself fit. So yeah, my actual first sort of sporting love, I suppose, with athletics, and that lasted until I went to university, which probably where any sort of promising athletes career takes a halt if you enjoy university well and don't concentrate on your training. So then that kind of took me back into hockey, and I suppose I just reignited the love for the sport. So for me, it kind of brought everything back from my younger childhood. And yeah, I don't regret not playing it from the age of sort of 8, 9 onwards for sort of 10 years, but it led me down a different path, which has now brought me back to here. So those experiences can only help me and others along that journey, I suppose.
Yeah.
So.
And people along that sort of path that inspired you, so in the hockey world, so who inspired you and why?
I mean, my dad would be my first inspiration when it comes to the sport, really, because, you know, just the passion that he had for the game and the love that he had for it and the way that he was with it was, you know, just something that I'll never, ever sort of forget. I grew up really fortunately in the area of, you know, Glen Kirkham. So for me, he was a family friend. So the next sort of inspiration would be him and how he went to, you know, to a couple of Olympic games, and, you know, things like that really helpful. And then building that on, you know, you look outside of GB and you go further. I mean, the biggest inspiration for me would be Jamie Dwyer, like the way that he was in hockey. And when I got to meet him at the 2018 World Cup in England, I was like a little kid. So I was like a kid in a sweet shop. You know, all these kids are there wanting a picture with him, and there's a little 40-year-old me going, Jamie, can I have a picture too, please? So because just it is different, and that was something special for me to do that and have a conversation with him about coaching and have a conversation about playing and his perception of the game, and had a really good discussion about hockey nines, because in Australia Mick Charlesworth brought in a thing around hockey nines a while ago, and it was something that I was always intrigued in, you know, and the game. So yeah, massive. There's so much.
So many. And I'm glad you mentioned Glen Kirkham. Glen coached in my very first year at Sedbergh. So when I came back in employment, he came in the courses, and I've loved meeting all these people. So, you two, Glenn, Krista, and another one that you'll both meet is he's on next week, called Dean Macy. So you probably know him for fishing, but once upon a time he did a little bit of athletics, and just sort of like the life and soul of the coaching party. So we have this every morning. We have a get together as the coaches in a sort of forum about what we want to achieve from the day. And you're all incredible people in your own rights, and it's great when you all share the stories and stuff like that. So I look forward to getting it going in the summer, and fingers crossed for this Easter. I know you've got to go, Gary, so don't feel in your own time. Don't feel like you're just going to sort of Badoonie and just vanish into thin air. But thanks for your time tonight. Beckie and I will continue to discuss how amazing the summer's going to be.
It will be a fantastic summer, I have no doubt, for sure. And I'm sure that at some point I'll be able to come to Sedbergh, deliver a course, and be able to meet everybody in full, rather than just meeting you in some dodgy services. There we go.
Not dodgy. Nothing dodgy about them. But cheers, Gary, and we'll catch up soon.
We will indeed. So take care, Beckie. Great to see you again. All right.
Beckie, I'll chuck the same question over to you. So, as a youngster, who inspired Beckie Middleton?
Well, it's again one of those slightly funny ones. So when I was growing up, there wasn't hockey on TV. There wasn't sort of matches being streamed. It wasn't kind of as accessible, I guess, as a sport. So probably my two kind of sporting influences were firstly Sally Gunnell from athletics, and secondly Eric Cantona. So big Man United fan. I've probably lost a few of the audience now. I've said that.
You've kept me, so just keep talking. You're all right.
I don't care. Yeah. So I mean the reason really for those two kind of being influences. So Sally Gunnell just kind of seemed to get every ounce of kind of potential out of herself. Always seems to do it with a smile on her face, which we've already kind of touched on. Something that I kind of identify with. And then Eric Cantona, I found him a kind of that real perfect balance of kind of commitment, but with creativity. And there's lots of things in my kind of hockey game which I wish I was better at, but I think both of those two things would be things I probably would say were part of my sort of style of play, I guess. And yeah, just really enjoyed kind of watching him score goals.
I can imagine me and you on a hockey pitch now. So if Eric Cantona inspired you, mine was definitely Roy Keane. So I'll look after the midfield. I'll do all the donkey work and let you take all the glory at the other end.
I mean, when it came to hockey, I think a little bit as well from obviously, say, growing up over in Jersey, there wasn't kind of, there wasn't a whole heap of sort of hockey role models in the sort of sense of an international. But there were lots of players, I guess, I watched as I was growing up and, thought, that's cool, they can do that, I want to learn to do that. And then actually when I got over to England, went over to uni and stuff, I guess I ended up being teammates with people I probably did see as role models. So, obviously lots of people on here will know a fair bit about hockey. Helen Richardson-Walsh, massive influence for me. And kind of one of those people who, as I say, started off probably being a little bit sort of intimidated by and ended up being really good friends with. And, I think that's one of the kind of really nice things about our sport is that it is accessible, whether you get to play alongside somebody or, whether you get to go and watch an international at, Lee Valley or the Stoop or whatever. And then, typically you probably can go and get an autograph or a photo with other people that you enjoy watching online or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. You're not Premier League footballers in the greatest of respects. You can meet your superstars and your heroes of the game. Same in sort of my sport as well. But what were the intricacies then? What made you fall in love with the sport? What was it that grabbed you?
I mean, I think so. I grew up on the side of a hockey pitch in that both my parents played. My mum better than my dad, but they both played, and so I kind of was there, when I was a young kid. When I didn't start playing until I was at secondary school, which by sort of nowadays standards is actually relatively late, I think. And then, I mean, but I just love the kind of the speed of the game, the creativity of the game. I think it's really cool with hockey how, you know, you can play a sort of 70-meter game splitting pass, or you can do a really intricate bit of kind of skill in eliminating somebody over a few centimeters. And both of those things are kind of really exciting to watch in their own way. I think that's something that's relatively unique to hockey. And yeah, I mean, other than that, I think just the strategic side I find interesting. You know, and I guess as I've moved into the coaching world, I've had a bit more of an opportunity to sort of extend my, you know, being a bit of a nerd basically, which I kind of did as I was a player, but you obviously get even more opportunity to do it as a coach.
A student, a model student, not a nerd. Yeah. Beckie, I told you before, I warned you before we went live that I could just jump off track a little bit. And I'm just thinking back to and you mentioned some of the words now, that's why I want to sort of ask you to it. And then Helen's asked a really nice question in the chat box, and we'll go to her in a second. But if I'm going to give you the 3 words that were attached to this webinar, which was mindset, skills, and speed, and you touched on 2 of them slightly. But what would mindset, skills, and speed mean to you in a hockey sense? So start with mindset.
So I mean, mindset is such a huge one, because I think there are loads of different ways that you can have a good mindset. I think kind of being out there to, you know, to enjoy it is, again, there's something we've mentioned a few times already this evening. I think it's a really kind of valuable approach to have. So I think that's kind of a useful starting point. There's so many aspects to kind of psychology, I guess, and different people have kind of different strengths in, you know, different areas. For me, I think just kind of always going in and sort of giving it everything is a really kind of useful building block. Again, for different people that might look slightly different. For one person it means diving headlong to try and, you know, make a game saving tackle, or that would be Krista, or score a goal, that would be me. You know, for somebody else it might just mean sort of doing absolutely everything they can to be as fit as they possibly can. It might be taking time out to learn about tactics and strategy. There's loads of different kind of elements to what, you know, doing everything looks like. And then it's a really funny one, because when you think about kind of winning, clearly it's important, and it's the reason that we all step out onto the pitch. It's a motivator, and, you know, I love winning. You know, that's why when I get asked about what my sort of favorite experiences are, often it's when we won a medal, or when we, you know, won a big game or whatever. But I think the key bit is figuring out the mindset that allows you to give yourself the best chance of winning. And again, that might look a little bit different for different people. So an example would be, before a game, I like just being really kind of chilled. So I could happily I could probably sort of have somebody pass me 2 bouncing hockey balls, you know, make a couple of traps. I'll go and sit on the bench for a bit and sort of have a bit of a water bottle and maybe chat to somebody a little bit. Somebody else wants to do things at a million miles an hour, you know, fit in as many reps as possible, hit 50 shots. And that's like absolutely fine. And I think this is one of the things which, like, as a young player, you know, that's the kind of stuff which you can start figuring out, work out what it is that when the whistle goes for the start of the game, you're going to be in the right headspace to do your job for the team, to, you know, look at the opposition out there in front of you and figure out what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, how the tactical stuff you spoke about in the team talk is applying in that second, in that minute, in that kind of phase of play. And yeah, just work out what it is that gets the best out of you.
I think it's good for a coach to understand that as well, and accept that there is a different way and mindsets within your team, and whatever gets the best out of the individual for the team collective is really important. I struggled with that at the very early days of my coaching. Was, why is everyone not bouncing off the walls? Why is everyone not, like you say, getting the reps in and working at such a high intensity? But it was a quick lesson. I learned it very quickly. That's just making people tick in their way, I suppose.
Yeah. And yeah, what was it? Speed and
skills and speed.
Skills and speed. So, I mean, I think, you know, it's pretty obvious to anyone who kind of watches hockey at a good level that, you know, skills and speed are basically the 2 kind of building blocks of what makes a good player. I think the key thing I would say is that it's very easy to think of skills as being somebody who's good on the ball in terms of being able to dribble past somebody. And I've already kind of mentioned it, there's loads of different aspects to what a skill is. So it might be being able to hit a ball, absolutely on the money over 70 meters. It might be, beating somebody when you've got the ball on the end of your stick. It might just be never getting tackled. And one of the kind of things that we spoke about a lot when I was kind of playing international stuff, and I know is still kind of a big thing now, is the idea of super strengths. And kind of, that sort of, I suppose it's the question of, as a coach, should you be getting players to practice things that they're already good at, or things that they could get better at? And I think, the figuring out what it is that is your kind of little X factor, or what your thing is that makes you different, makes you contribute to a team, from a kind of skill point of view, is really important. And I mean, touching on kind of what the camp might look like in the summer, I would definitely be aiming to try and get like a real range of different sort of technical skills included within the programme, and giving people an opportunity to practice the stuff and to, almost not show off, but, build even more confidence in the stuff that they feel really good about, but also be really happy to make good mistakes and get out of their comfort zone and, give things a try that they wouldn't typically do. When it comes to speed, it's a tricky one in the sense that it's probably the thing which is, or one of the physical capabilities anyway, which is most sort of impacted by genetics, basically. Naturally, there's always going to be some people who are on the sort of fast end of the spectrum and some people who are on the slightly slower end of the spectrum. I think the key thing I would say with that is you don't have to be Usain Bolt, but you can find a way to get speed into your game. So it might be speed of legs, it might be speed of thought. If you can do both of those things, then you're in clover.
Yeah, you took that out of my mouth there. The speed of thought is equally as powerful in terms of losing a defender, finding some space, moving ahead of the ball, etc. So
yeah, definitely, and typically that if you sort of ask somebody to describe what a really great hockey player looks like, they'd usually say something like they look like they've got more time on the ball than other people, and usually that's because they're thinking faster. So it's not necessarily just an easy concept to grab hold of when you're practicing, when you're training, but trying to kind of just be one step ahead of the game and anticipate things and learn to recognize patterns and things kind of might happen in front of you, is the best way to get better at that.
A good friend of the course is Helen Weston asked a question before around what qualities do you think are going to be required for players of the future? So Helen coaches a lot of junior players. So in terms of aspirationally moving forward, what is the one or two skills that you think that any aspiring young hockey players should be focusing on to maximise the most of that in the future?
So it's a really interesting question. I think it's probably a question that there's some context to, because every team is different, every player is different. And going back to that idea of super strengths, I think, we do want to be kind of encouraging people to make their little X factor as good as it can possibly be. Having said that, I think the direction the sport's moving in, it's getting quicker. If that's actually possible, it seems to be just getting faster and faster. Obviously that's supported by stuff like the way that substitutions are run and the way defence is kind of set up now and things like that. But I guess just trying to be able to execute things and make decisions with little time and little space. And ideally we want to get players into a position where they can play the game in lots of different ways. And I suppose that, it sounds like a kind of bit of a contradiction against what I've just said, but I think actually developing players that can play themselves in a particular way or another different way, but also can kind of recognise those things in the team they're up against, and adapt accordingly. And that's one of the things that can be really difficult when you train and coach a team, because usually you've got one eye on the game this Saturday or the championship in a few weeks' time, whatever it is. But the more that we can develop players who can defend in lots of different ways and can, use different skills when they're on the ball, whether it's a long pass, a short pass, a dribble to eliminate or a dribble to move the ball to space, a sort of implicit understanding of what the teammate next to them might do or what they might need them to do. that kind of stuff. So that's a bit of a kind of non-answer really, because I've just sort of said everything. But I think
okay,
just
Helen's still,
adaptable but fast is kind of the
Helen's still going to call me tomorrow and just talk this through for hours. So I'm just going to pass her on for you.
All good. And the one thing I would say as well, so I know there's been a few questions in the chat, and I haven't really answered any of them because I've been trying to make sure I'm listening.
Oh, you have? Don't worry.
I can do it later. I'll make sure I take the time to answer people's questions.
Well, going over to Ava, and then I've got one to finish with. But which was your favourite country to play in as a club? What were the different experiences like?
So it's a really interesting question. So I was lucky enough to play 2 seasons of club hockey in Holland. So I played for Kampong and for Pinoquet. But sort of at different times in my career, which I think probably had a bit of an impact on the experience itself. But I mean, I think as a hockey player, you know, Holland is probably the sort of mecca of club hockey. So to kind of have the experience of playing over there, you know, with some incredible players, but also just in what I would probably describe as the best league in the world, I think was definitely up there. I've also played in Australia and New Zealand for kind of rep hockey, so like the Australian Hockey League and the NHL in New Zealand, and I mean, yeah, every time I've done that, it's just been brilliant. You know, again, I've been lucky enough to tag on a bit of travel alongside it, so that's been pretty cool. But you know, all I suppose unique experiences in their own way, but definitely very memorable.
So England's 4th.
No, look, I mean, I've loved playing over here, otherwise I would have moved somewhere else, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I think you remember different places for different reasons. I mean, in an international shirt, the best place I played was Argentina, and it was literally just, you know, I think if you asked a lot of particularly female international hockey players, they'd answer Argentina for that particular question, because the atmosphere is just absolutely mental. You know, they're all kind of jumping up and down in the stands, and you have to get sort of escorted to your bus because there's like loads of people everywhere, and everyone wants kind of a piece of you, and it feels completely alien to hockey players used to, you know, sort of stepping off the side of the pitch and there's, you know, one man and his dog there and that kind of stuff. So from that point of view, yeah, Argentina would also be a real highlight.
Julie has just put a question in which I'm going to rephrase, and I'm going to add one more question to our evening, then I'll leave you to relax and enjoy and catch up with the cat.
Shut
Julie's,
her out.
good on you. What's been your favourite setback that you've managed to overcome? So Julie, I'm sorry, I just slightly put a different twist on it, just to sort of say, is there anything you look back on and think, I'm really proud of how I overcame that setback and moved forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a sort of funny one. I think probably I would say missing out on Olympic selection and kind of getting up and going again. And I think, like, if you watch like a sport, one of those kind of inspirational sports movies, like what typically the sort of arc of the story is, you know, sort of you get introduced to the character, something terrible happens to them, you know, whatever that is, they get back on the horse, and in the end they succeed and they achieve their dreams. For me, like, that last part didn't really actually happen in the end, in the sense that I didn't get to go to the Olympics, and I didn't get to, you know, obviously the last 2 Olympic Games, the GB girls have medalled, and obviously, you know, as everyone knows, last time won a gold medal. And, you know, it sort of, there's a part of that, obviously, which is like really sort of difficult to stomach and to kind of deal with. But I mean, I think the fact that, you know, when you asked me at the very beginning what my kind of involvement in hockey was, and the fact that pretty much my whole sort of career profile is in some way related back to the game, you know, I guess that shows that, you know, I've got that sort of real inherent love for the game and for the people in the game and for kind of just being involved in it day to day. So even though, I didn't sort of, you know, fall off the horse, get back on and win the race, I think just dealing with that experience and learning from that experience, and probably like massively, I would say, feeding it into what I'm like as a coach and as a teammate. I think that's probably something which, you know, when I'm a little old granny in a few years, I'll probably look back on and be able to feel sort of like relatively proud of myself.
Yeah, I think, and not knowing you that long at all, but you talk about, and how you talk about what you do, you're inspiring the next generation. So you won't meet the amount of people in your lifetime that you will inspire and get to pick up a hockey stick and get to play a game, and they will get a love for it. And that's something that I hope when you are a granny that you can look back on and be really proud of yourself. And we're really excited to get you up to work with us in the summer and to share those experiences with everyone. But last final question, Beckie, would be, and I think I put it on there, so 3 words that your fellow coaches or previous coaches would describe you as. What would they be as a shootout question?
So full disclosure, I did know about this question in advance. So I wrote down 2 words and I was like, oh God, I don't know what the third one would be. So the 2 words I wrote down were fun and approachable, which I hope are true, but I then asked my sister, and I asked a girl that I've done a lot of coaching with and played with, for quite a long time, and lots of you will know who she is. It was Giselle Ansley, and she said, well, in fact, my sister said the same thing. They both said you need to put organised, and I was like, guys, that makes me sound a bit boring. But I think in terms of actually, if I tie those 3 things together, hopefully it means that we can have fun, that people can kind of talk to me, but also that there is a plan. And I think as a kind of as far as a camp goes, one of my sort of key things, and I will say this probably on day 1 and I'll probably repeat it, I want everybody to walk away from the camp on day 4 feeling more confident and like a better player than they were on day 1. And hopefully those 3 things kind of will contribute to that sort of feeling from the player group. I think, I've touched on it loads of times. I think enjoying what you do is absolutely crucial. And I think, as a coach, you have to bring those kind of qualities if you're wanting to allow the players to have that same experience. So if I'm out there with a smile on my face and kind of buzzing around and being super energetic and getting stuck in, then I think most likely the players will have the kind of license and want to do the same. So that would be my kind of 3 goals.
Thanks, Beckie. You would have noticed that I put myself on mute for the last 30 seconds, and you might have seen this big blonde perm come in. Thanks very much for tonight. These are the guys. This is the gang that just wanted to come here and say hello to Beckie quickly. She's not used to this. She's used to Simon and Dave out the office. So there you go. Say hi. And from all of us 3 and everyone at Sedbergh, thank you very much for your time tonight. We really appreciate it, and I hope everybody got a lot out of the chat and the discussion, and we see them all in July and August moving forward. And if there is any questions from the chat box that we haven't answered, we'll try and get back to people in the next week or so. And if you look back and want to ask any further questions, then don't hesitate to sort of question us, and we'll return that as well. So enjoy your evening, everyone. Thanks very much. And we'll see you all soon.